Welcome, everyone, to the Sport Fuels Life podcast. I'm Bill Riddle, your host. We hope you enjoy our latest episode. We are actually going to kick it off with an older friend. I'm not going to say an old friend because that makes us both sound bad, but an older friend of mine that I've known for a long, long time, Tami Matheny. And Tami, I could not be more excited to start this off with having you joining us here. And I feel like we're just kind of reconnecting after some years here.
Yes, I am so excited when I got your message. I was like, of course I'll jump on here with Bill. But um, I have a lot of appreciation for you helping me get started in the coaching world. So I'm
Oh,
excited about our conversation.
well, this is gonna be fun. Now, you are listed on the website as a mental coach,
Mhm.
but you have a history in tennis and kind of maybe where you got started. If people don't know who you are, bring us up to speed. Who is Tammy Matheny? What's your journey in tennis, and give us a few minutes of that.
Okay, so um, I started before my hometown even had high school courts. So just with the wooden racket that I see in the background of yours, I had a wooden racket and just hit it against the brick wall or the garage. Finally, we got a court in town and didn't know how to keep score, but my dad took us out there every single day. Ended up having a pretty good high school career, went on to play in college. Ultimately, that led me to you eventually, which I think I was behind the desk. And then you were like, wait a minute, you have a history in tennis. Let's get you certified. So I am grateful for that and you helping me get USPTR certified. Um, Fast forward a few years after that, and well, I went to Florida, was a assistant tennis pro at Tampa Yacht and Racket Club. Um, Went back to grad school. After grad school, took a job at then the University of South Carolina, Spartanburg, which is now University of South Carolina Upstate, and coached men and women's tennis there for I think it was about 15 years at the Division II level, and then helped with the stepping up to Division I level. And
Right.
now I work with an endless amount of tennis players on the mental game.
Okay. But here's the thing though, you also work with other athletes because I know you've done some work with like Belmont Soccer. You come to Nashville quite often, and I know you're getting around the country, but talk a little bit about what you're doing outside of tennis with other athletes.
You're right. I work in about every single sport. Actually, even cheerleaders, are dance competitions, but any sport you name it, because the mental skills are the same. It's just we have to talk a different lingo. But I do travel across the U.S., do a lot of Zooms, even internationally, with one-on-one clients, going in with teams, like you referenced. Even working with coaches and or parents on how they can help their athlete. Webinars, podcasts, trying to write books to get information out there. So any way I can help fill that gap, because I feel like athletes, especially tennis players, we spend so much physical time that often we neglect making sure that we're putting in the mental work as well.
Right. And so, when you see somebody it says, "Hey, Bill Riddle, tennis coach, Lane Evans, soccer coach," that is pretty easy to figure out, right? You're coaching those things. When someone says Tammy Matheny, mental coach, I'm assuming you're coaching my mind, but what does that really, really mean?
I laugh because you can imagine what some people think mental coach. Oh my gosh, that means I'm mental. There are some negative connotations to that, but the best way I describe it is I'm like that strength and conditioning coach for your mind. We spend a lot of time strength and conditioning. We don't stop even when we do get strong. It's like we want to keep building. And I feel like the mental skills are the same. So I'm coaching an athlete on how are we making this mind work for you instead of against you? And often that's athletes looking just how do I get the next edge? Some of them are dealing with confidence or adversity, but others it's like, how can I get, a leg up on my competition?
And when you talk about team sports versus individual sports, And I must assume that tennis, maybe cheerleading, but golf, some of these individual sports, um, it's a different approach for you than a team sport. But then you throw the curveball where you've got a college team or a high school team. How does that kind of fit into like what you're doing when you're working with these athletes or the coaches?
Every situation's different. Someone just asked me this, like, if you come in and work with my team, what does that look like, Tammy? And to be honest, it's different because every team, every individual have unique needs. There might be some similar crossover, but we all have different struggles and our brains all process different things. So that's why I think the word coaching is really important, Bill, because I've got to work hand in hand with that coach, with that athlete on what is best for their team, for the individual. So I feel like, really learning how to connect with people and get them to want to talk and open up, not talk about your deepest, darkest secrets or feelings, but hey, what are you thinking when you're serving for match point? And getting them to start processing that, I feels like the most important, at least as far as laying the foundation to where we can jump in and, okay, now I'm hearing this from you. So, hey, let's try this technique or this tip.
Right.
Now, a lot of it's the same that you hear from sports psychologists, reframing our self-talk, visualizing, and stuff like that. But again, we all respond differently. So I feel like that human connection is probably one of the most important things.
And you coming from the tennis background, we've probably heard the same thing that tennis is 75% mental, 25% physical, right? And I don't know, maybe tell us those are correct numbers, maybe they're not. How how do people get past that or understand that, wait a minute, so I'm only hitting balls for 25% of the time or whatever that number is, and then what am I doing the rest of the time? Walk us through what that looks like.
Different numbers have been thrown out there to answer that first, and I don't really know. I guess again, it's probably all different for every individual. But if you look at it, we do probably spend a significant higher amount of time on the physical. And we say maybe it's 75, 80% mental, but you're not spending 75, 80% of the time on the mental game. You're spending that on the physical. So it is inversed a little bit. But I feel like if you have a daily and a weekly game plan, then it might be 30 minutes that you're spending on it. But that consistency of building those skills day in and day out on things you can control, is what's really going to help elevate tennis players to the next level. I mean, our bodies can only physically do so much. And so mental game is a way to fill in inadequacies, to fill in insecurities, as well as just keep making your skills even stronger than they already are.
Right. And when we look at where we are here in the South and the brutality of the heat that's out there, when you get into matches, I've actually got the women's event going on in the background here from Cleveland, and they're talking about how hot it is up there. When you talk about matches and tennis players playing in the heat of our summers and early falls, how much of that is mental getting through situations like that versus physical? Because from a tennis coach's standpoint, we hear from the trainers, "Hey, look, you got to do the work outside to be ready for it." But then partly for me, it's like, well, yeah, I could do that, but still, I got to get through it mentally.
Yes. And the physical part is important. I mean, preparation to me is one of the things that builds confidence. If we know we've put in the work, if we know we've prepared our body to handle the heat, if we know we've prepared enough water, prepared enough electrolytes to take with us on the court, we're naturally going to feel like we can overcome that better. So, preparation, whether it's physically on the court or all your gear being ready, is a piece of the mental game. But then let's get into the mental. The more you talk and focus about something, Bill, the more it grows. If I go out on the court and I talk about how hot it is, I mean, studies have shown us it becomes 10 degrees hotter because we're focusing on it and your brain is zoomed in. Man, it's so hot. And you've seen that at a clinic, probably, somebody, oh God, I'm so hot. And then everybody else says it, and you just feel a lot worse than it is. So it's learning how to talk to yourself. I read a book, I guess, I don't know, a handful of years ago. It was the inverse of talking about cold weather, but I feel like we can apply the same to the heat. And it was mountain climbers. So this guy was climbing Mount Everest, and he ran into the Russian national climbing team. I didn't even know there was a national team. There are. And they were all, grown men, but there was a 16-year-old guy with him. And he was talking to the Russians, and the Russian says, this is going to be one of the greatest climbers in the world. He's so skilled, he's going to be awesome. Well, they go out their own ways or whatever. And I guess back down the mountain, he ran back into that team. But that young man wasn't there any longer. And he's like, what happened to this guy? Did he fall off the mountain, or what happened?
I
And
thought that's where you were going with this. I don't.
no, that's not, no. But they said, well, he became a weakness for the team because he talked about how cold it was. So we had to let him go. Talent wise, the greatest, they said, was going to be the greatest. But because he was complaining about how cold it was, they couldn't allow that on their team. Just that mindset. So that really left a lasting impression with me. But it's so true. If we start to look for something, we're going to find it. So when we
Right.
start to see how hot it is, or how we've never done well in the heat playing, um, your brain has an ego, and it's going to try to show you that you're right, good or bad.
Interesting. So when you talk about, and many of our listeners and those that are on with us come from team tennis background, whether it be junior team tennis, high school, middle school, college, even club ladies teams, right? All right. How do we? And I like what you just said. They let him go because he was mentally kind of the weak link for the team, even though skill wise he was great. How do coaches kind of manage that when when you've got that one guy or girl that's mentally just not able to keep up with everybody else? In reality, I mean, it's great for the national team to let him go, but for us at our club or our high school, how do we then not cut that kid? How do we get him up to speed and help him out?
Well, at this level, it's education. They've never been told this or talked about, and I made that mistake as a young coach. I'll use the example of saying, "Hey, be confident." I mean, I'm patting myself on the back, thinking I'm being positive and supportive here. Um, but I had a young man tell me one time, "Coach, you know that doesn't help, right?" And I was like, "What? I'm trying to be supportive." He's like, no, you're telling me to do something that I'm struggling to do. It's not like I'm not trying to be confident. I don't know how.
Right.
And it's like he said, every time you say it, you're just adding more frustration. I thought, wow, okay. Um, so I see that, and I can say that I'm not lecturing any coach that's listening because I've made that mistake. But
Right.
as coaches, hey, be confident or don't focus on the heat. Okay, well, we need some techniques, some tools, what to think otherwise. And so it really does start with education. You can't just tell them not to do something or to do something if they don't have that skill set.
Interesting. And so when you're talking about that kid that is struggling, how would you then for a coach, right? For me, how would I then help that kid? Is it during the team practice, or do we come together? Because I'm not a mental coach. Don't claim to be one. I'm mentally unstable sometimes, but how would I then help that young man or young woman get over those humps if we couldn't call you?
So one of the best exercises, and I actually got this, I heard Kobe Bryant on a podcast many years ago. And I actually got to talk to his mental game coach that he worked with. Yeah, the elite use mental game coaches at any level. That's the thing that we need to make sure we recognize. But he was struggling with that self-talk when he was a high schooler going into the NBA. Everybody thinks, oh, he was Kobe, but no, he had insecurities. Am I going to be good enough? Can I really play against these grown men? What if I let my team down? And this exercise that I've got from them said it really changed the trajectory of Kobe's career. 5 minutes a day.
Okay.
You think about the negative or unproductive things that you've said, and you rewrite them just for 5 minutes, no more than that, because that amount of time will help you get reps in of thinking on a higher, better, stronger level. So he would write down, can I really play with these grown men? Underneath it, he would write something that he wanted to respond instead. And so that repetition of just changing your self-talk creates your foundation. One thing I did have every team do before you start a practice. Hey, Bill, turn to your teammate, share a negative thought you've had today, preferably about tennis, but if you need to use from school or family or whatever, do that. Now rephrase it. So now we've already got one rep in, but the more you do that, it just becomes a habit, and your subconsciousness starts to, okay, I got to change my way of thinking. All right. I thought, oh my gosh, what if I double fault? Okay. Instead, change it, where am I going with this ball? Because if I'm focused on what I'm doing, I have a better chance. If I'm focused on don't double fault, I'm going to double fault. So that's an example of a rep that you could do. But the more you do that, again, it goes in your subconsciousness. I thought I had some here, but I don't. But another thing is wearing a rubber band.
Okay.
Every time you have a thought that doesn't work for you, you pop it. And after a while, it becomes a visual. Um, and I have parents ask me for rubber bands all the time too, as they're watching, to keep
Right.
from the negative thoughts they have. So that those are two simple ways that we can really start to train our self-talk, because that's where everything's created. I mean, our thoughts build the world we live in.
And so, you were talking about the rubber band, and then you brought in the parent, and that was one of the things I had written down here. Is for majority of us, we've heard how crazy tennis parents are, which is somewhat true, right? Let's be honest. But
There are some.
there are a few. So then how do we have that tough conversation with parents, especially when you're at the club? You're a country club pro, right? And mom and dad are hovering over them. They're picking apart their strokes, and they're always there at the match. And I've had it in our college matches. We've had some players that had parents that were in tennis, and I thought it was going to be better, but it actually was almost worse. 'Cause they were hanging around, lurking behind the fences. How do we as coaches kind of jump into that circle of this is what we need for your child to be successful? How do we start down that path?
Again, it starts with education, although there are a lot of parents that don't want to be education. It's my child, I'll do, or say what I want. I do recognize that's out there, but giving them a chance and saying, hey, this is what I'm asking our players to do, can parents start modeling this? Because we learn how to talk from our parents and our coaches. I mean,
Right.
if mom comes home complaining about her job, I start to think that that's okay to go home and complain about my coach. I mean, I don't think consciously we make that connection, but it happens.
Right.
Oh gosh, it's so hot outside. I'm starting to think how hot it is outside. So I think it's the education of, or getting the buy-in of the parents. I'm doing this for your athlete to try to help them. It would really, you know, speed up the process if you guys are doing this as well. And it's going to help your athlete. Um, that you can't always control parents, obviously, but giving them, why is this important? How is this going to help your athlete? Because that's what they're most worried about. So if you can explain that, then you're more likely to get the buy-in.
So would you say then maybe having beginning of the season, right? Let's say you're a high school coach, middle school coach, whatever. You have a team meeting, right,
Yeah.
with not the players but the parents, and lay out kind of, here's where I'm going to drive the bus, right? And
Mhm.
are you along for the ride? And if not, let's kind of air it out now before we get into practice and matches, and then all of a sudden we've got problems.
I think that is the best way to start. Every team I work with, I suggest either, hey, let me come talk to your parents, or make sure you are talking to your parents about the mental game. And again, we say mental game and we think we need to bring in someone, which does help. It takes that off the coaches because you've already got so much on your plate already. But you don't have to do that. You can say, hey, we're going to try to implement this 5 minute writing exercise 3, 4 times a week. We want your buy-in on that. Or when you catch your child talking negative, challenge them to change it to something positive or productive.
Okay.
Um, trying to get that buy-in, giving them exercises. One other thing too, Bill, I have found this helps coaches and parents. But what I call 5 1s. After every single practice, what are 5 specific things I did well? I don't care how bad it was or how good it was, and for matches as well. And then what's one thing I can work on? Because
Okay.
what I've seen with these crazy parents is that they start, oh, you did this wrong and you could have done this better and this better and this better. Well, our brain can only zoom in at one thing. If we have a list of things we got to improve on, we're just going to stay on that merry-go-round and never really improve on one thing. It's kind of like
Right.
when you're teaching someone to serve, you have to break it down until they get that, then you add the next element and the next element. And that's a lot like with getting better physically. Okay, you need to work on this, but these are 5 things you did do well. So what you focus on grows. So now I'm not just beating myself up. Oh, okay, mom, dad, they did recognize I did some things good. Now this is my focus for getting better tomorrow. Or for coaches. I think that's a very, very effective tool for coaches. I mean, and most out there, maybe you're rolling your eyes. I rolled my eyes at that. I did not create that, but I have studied it, and the 5 to 1 is the magic ratio. It took me about a year to get used to that because I thought you got better by listing everything you did wrong.
Right.
Uh, so that took some undoing.
As you were saying that, I'm thinking, okay, so my experience has been the player comes off and there's, 5 things they did wrong, and I'm pulling out of them
Mhm.
the one thing that they did well, right? If you can even get that many times, especially if it was a loss, even sometimes with the wins, they can't tell you what they did well. So getting them to go 5 things I did well could have been I had my rackets with me, right? Which
Yeah,
for some
yeah.
players is a struggle, right? Uh, so 5 to 1, and am I doing this every time, or am I picking as a coach the time to do this?
I think it's more effective to do something every single time. As a coach, I know you can't maybe always do that, but I'm maybe asking, again, trying to get the parents to ask this afterwards, but maybe having a little notebook where they write down their 5 1s after every match, regardless if you ask for it or not, so they get in that habit. You do something sometime, you get sometime results. You do it consistently, you're going to get consistent results.
Right. Here's the honest to goodness truth. I'm writing as much of this information down as I can for myself, because as you know, we start the college season here September the 1st. Many of our listeners are going to be starting their seasons as well. Here's the one that kind of came to me as you were talking about the parents and the kids when they come off court. How much time should I give that player? When they leave the court, match is done, they leave the court or they leave the court they were on. How much time do I give them? Because many years ago, I spent a little bit of time with Bob and Mike Bryan's dad, Wayne, and he said something that's always stuck with me. He said, no matter what happened for the boys, they would come off and he would just give them high five, and he would be like 30 minutes or an hour or sometime later on they would talk about the match, and I can actually remember we were in New York when he was doing this presentation, and that's always stuck with me that it was just high five or a fist bump, win or lose, and then sometime later on. For you, this is the space you live in. What's the a right amount of time?
I think that varies with every single athlete. If you left me alone, that would have probably driven me crazy. I want to talk about it. I need to talk about it and process it immediately. Others need to be left alone. Some just need, hey, it's good. I probably would have gone ballistic on my dad if he had just done that. But I know a lot of athletes, they need that as well. So I don't think there's a right or wrong. What I tell parents and coaches in a non-emotional moment, so not right before a big match, like to start the season, hey, let's ask them, what do you need from me prior to your match? Like the day of your match. Do you need me to call and, wish you good luck? Do you need me to send you an inspirational text? Do you need me to leave you alone? Because some of us want to be left alone, but others might think, well, my parent doesn't care. They didn't send me a good luck message. So what do you need before the match, the day of the match? What do you need from me during the match? Some want that constant, hey, good shot, good shot. Others don't even want to see their parent during the match. So what do you need during the match? And then last thing, what do you need from me after?
Okay.
And, parents are like, well, my kids won't know how to answer that. They probably won't initially. But what you're doing is getting them to be part of this process and getting them to start to think, okay, if I lose, what do I want my mom or dad to do? If I do lose, what do I want my coach to do right now? And
Right.
so you're starting to process that and taking a little bit of, accountability for how your parents and coaches can help you. And I always suggest to put it in writing. Have them text it to you or email it because it's in writing. Then that way you can go back and look at it and okay, this is what they said they need.
That's really, I mean, great to hear because as you were saying that, I'm thinking back to last spring, and I had a young lady on the team that literally I couldn't get within, 50 feet of the court, or I could see that she would play differently. She'd be just nervous and tight. But she was looking for, thumbs up or just some eye contact when she did something well. And then you've got the other player who's like, sit here, don't leave, don't look at your watch, don't take a drink. I just need you focus on me. And when you're in the team coaching environment, how would you tell a coach then, okay, you got these 9 different personalities, and I'm not talking about just one person. I'm talking about 9 different players with 30 different personalities. But how do I manage that as a coach, so that I'm giving you what you need, and I'm giving Dave what he needs, and I'm giving Sarah what she needs.
And that's another great question. And that is a little bit different than the parent because the parent is there just for their child. So
Right.
um, I think it's having that dialogue. I want to know what you need from me. That does not mean I can always be there and do this exactly. It at least equips me with, but ultimately I'm the coach. I have to see the bigger picture. And if there's a tight match over there that the team may win or lose. I've got to make that decision. Doesn't mean I care any less. Doesn't mean I didn't hear what you need. Um, and I'm sure you explain that, Bill, but that's just for the coaches out there listening. You want that information. What do they need from you? But at the same time, there are 9, 10 players, so you can't give everyone exactly what they need all the time. And then that's where more of the mental game comes into play of equipping them to be able to be their own mental game coach on the court. And maybe, I suggest to every high school and college team I work with, have every athlete, you should always take a notebook, I feel like, even if it's just a small little notepad. Um, and what are 2 or 3 mental skills if I'm struggling, if my coach isn't there that I can lean on to at least try to change the momentum? Because we know
Okay.
that in tennis, if you can change the momentum, you're back in the game. Time's not going to run out on you in tennis, and that's the beauty of tennis.
Right. You know, and this is going to be kind of two-part, but I feel like tennis coaches, especially, right? Their value is what they're saying. They believe that, okay, I'm supposed to be talking all the time. And we've had assistant coaches come through that literally they would never shut up, right? And I'm probably completely the opposite of that. It's like, look, if I'm going to say something, I want it to be something that you grab hold to and use, because I understand most people, they're, one little nugget is what we're trying to get out of this, right? And so how do you help that player or that coach who feels like they got to consistently be talking, and at some point they're just kind of just tripping over themselves?
Yeah, and you do hear that a lot from the players. Like, coach talks too much. And I'm more along your lines, Bill. I want to give one nugget or make them laugh or make them think about something else for a second. That goes a lot further than trying to give instruction during a match. It's too late now for instruction.
Right.
That's what practice is for. Now, hey, remember to keep your head up on your serve or something, tidbit. Um, but that's again, everything goes back to education. That if we're talking mainly about younger coaches here or coaches that have never been taught, that comes from they don't know better. Their job is to coach, so they're supposed to be coaching, in the match, during the match. But to me, coaching to me, the definition is I'm helping you get to a place you couldn't get alone.
Okay.
And so that doesn't always need to be skill coaching. And that goes back again. If you have an assistant that way, hey, talk to Dave or talk to Lane and see what do they want from you during the match.
Right. It kind of goes back to, I guess, the theme of this keeps going back to communication, right?
Bingo,
And
bingo.
during or after, how am I communicating? What am I communicating to the athlete, or the staff, right, for the other coaches? Um, and so, how do coaches become better communicators?
Practice it. We often like to have excuses. I'm too busy, or this isn't important enough. But learning to communicate will save so many headaches later. And to me, that goes from coaches having those one-on-one meetings early on. And I know, oh, I've got too much going on. Taking a 5-10 minute meeting, talk about anything but tennis. So you're opening up the lines of communication. The more you can, hey, how was your weekend? Hey, how's your mom doing? Or the more you do that, just those tiny little bit of communication threads, you build trust. The more trust you build, then it's almost like you get permission to have stronger, harder conversations with them. But it takes practice. If I can't say, hey Bill, how was your weekend? Or, how's your son? Then how can I help you on the tennis court? I mean,
Right.
I might can, but that's where, especially if you're coaching a team. So if you don't like to communicate, practice. And I know a lot of people roll their eyes about social media or kids are always with their heads in their phone. If we have to, let's get on their level. Text them. Now, I think there should be some in person, but just the more you communicate in various ways, then I think you build that and you're getting practice at it. I believe in texting. I tell coaches, text at least one player after every practice. You can rotate them, you can be random. Hey,
Right.
really noticed how you did X, Y, and Z, or hey, it looked like you were struggling today. Keep your head up. I believe in you. So now you're communicating and you're just building that trust and an environment for more openness.
Right. Well, what's interesting is, you were talking a while ago and you said something about trying to make them laugh, right? And I've always believed in this. And so when you said that, I was like, oh, I actually been doing something kind of right for a while, because my thought has always been, if I'm giving a presentation, if I can get somebody to laugh in the first 2 minutes, then I got you, right? And we're on the same team. And I do the same thing with some of our players. If I can take a very tense situation that you're in, right? And make you just not necessarily laugh, but smile, and I can see the shoulders relax and I can see the jaw muscles kind of relax, then I feel like now whatever I say next, you might pick up on. So for
Uh-huh.
coaches, if they're not comedians, then could they still do something that would help them get there?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I love why you do that, but what it does to the chemistry of our bodies is amazing too. If we smile or laugh, it releases chemicals in our body that relax our muscles. So it doesn't even matter. I mean, it's good you follow up with something, but you don't even have to follow up with something because now you've got them relaxed. If they already know what to do, now they're more apt to be able to do that themselves. With junior tennis players I work with that don't have the coaching on the court, I tell them to take something to the court that they can have in their back pocket, per se, that when they do get tight, they can look at this picture that makes them laugh, or they have something written down that when they think about makes them smile. You know, like for me, would probably I'd take a picture of my dog. So I'm just realizing she could care less if I win or lose, and she makes me smile.
Right.
So athletes can take that responsibility as well and making sure you just have something to fall back on.
Right.
And I'll interject. This isn't the same thing as smiling, but it works pretty much. The power of music, Bill. Every
Uh,
athlete should have a go-to song in their head when they're getting frustrated. And so I just turn the music on in my head. And so a coach could say, hey, Everybody needs a song that they're going to, and then you remind them, hey, go sing to yourself.
I like that. So along those lines, give me your take on music during practice because I have felt like for years it sets a relaxed tone, and then you hear other coaches who say no, they're not serious if they're listening to music, and I agree. If I mean if I've got gangster rap going, versus just something that keeps upbeat, almost like cardio tennis music, right? Just something that's making me want to move and groove. What's your take on music during practice to help us, be better mentally?
I think more times than not, yes. I agree with you. It's probably the selection of the music that keeps people focused or their level of focus to begin with, and that music isn't really making or breaking that. Um, the only caveat I would put in there is we need to make sure though that it's not all the time because we want practice to be light matches, some you need that where you're just drilling, but then there has to be that progression where we're making it as match like as possible because
Right.
you hear that from athletes. I can practice so well, but I can't play a match. And sometimes that's always because you do have the music playing and now you don't in the match. But if you can take that song in your head, you're taking that music with you to the court. You know, this isn't tennis, but Michael Phelps, I read that he would listen to the same song 40 or 45 times, up to 45 times before he swam a race. So it's just on repeat. So he's not dealing with and he a lot of anxiety and
Okay.
or all of he's just singing the song to his head and got lost in the music.
Right. I like that. All right, so you got the player that literally just blows up, and they say, "Well, I have to let it out," right? And this is what makes me play better, right? The old John McEnroe, "This is how I am." Um, Probably, and to be fair, he might be the only tennis player ever that could actually do that. I think the rest of the world can't. Is my take on it. But how do we as coaches talk to and help that player goes they literally just come unglued and it seems like they do it more and more and more as opposed to just at one time.
Again, it's given them ways to control their emotions. Because if I'm a player that blows up, then I've probably never been taught emotional control.
Right.
And, when some little behind the background here, but when we have an emotion, it sets off a chemical reaction in our body. It lasts 90 seconds if we let it. But what do we usually do when we have a negative emotion? We
Just
pour gasoline on the fire and
yeah.
every evidence, like, okay, I double fault. Oh gosh, I hadn't gotten a serve in today, or I can't, and or I remember last match I had this problem, or maybe it's coach. Coach constantly does this. Yeah, I know, did that last time, and we keep that emotion stirring. If you can have a 90-second timeout, no, 90 seconds is not always possible, but
Right.
some kind of mental timeout where you're not thinking about what you're mad at or what you're nervous about or frustrated, it gives your brain a chance to reset.
Right.
So having a reset button, having a timeout, I tell people again, that's where music can help, but have that a physical and verbal reset button where physically you do something. Maybe it's slap my thigh. Maybe it's just take 5 deep breaths in a row. Maybe it's to look up at the sky. If we move our eyes and stare at the sky for 10 seconds, it actually interrupts the portion of our brain responsible for thinking. So it interrupts that thought.
Okay.
Same thing with squeezing your fist as hard as you can for 10 seconds. Now, I wouldn't suggest, rearing back, but, down by your side.
Yeah.
Um, so I've seen some athletes, they like brush it off their shoulder, like they're just trying to brush it off. And then following up with a verbal response. Okay, what are you going to do about this? Next point. My favorite go to is win. WIN. We all like to win, but it stands for what's important now. Okay, I messed up. I double fault. Win. How am I going to win? What's important now? Getting my next serve in or getting a good return if they're serving now. So now instead of dwelling on what's making us mad and blowing us up, we've moved our brain forward.
Okay.
But that
And
takes practice. It sounds easy, Bill, as I'm
yeah,
sitting here talking about it, but it takes getting those reps in a practice and getting them to recognize that. And okay, I see you're about to blow up. 90-second timeout here, and
right.
not blowing up at them. Then that just makes it worse.
Now let's go to the opposite side of that, right? Where you've got the player, they show no emotion, but you
Mm-hmm.
know it's bubbling on the inside. And we actually had a young lady, this was a year or so ago. She would show no emotion. And at some point, I felt like that was actually, I mean, it was a strength because her opponent could never really gauge what's going on, right? And she'd beat a lot of players who honestly were just kind of blowing up on them themselves. But then at some point, we needed her to show some emotion, to then maybe just kind of poke at the opponent a little bit, like, you know what, I just hit a really nice ball. Yes, give me a vamos, right? To send a message as opposed to playing well and then showing nothing, no excitement at all. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I see that need, but I have realized in past experiences that's harder even than getting someone that blows up to calm down because they've just learned to internalize. I do think positive emotion on the court can only elevate your game. And trying to again educate, communicate that and giving them simple ways and practicing it, not expecting them to do that come match time. But hey, we're going to play this game. You're going to play a tiebreaker with each other, and every point that you win, you have to do something. And
Right.
it can almost be a fun competition at that point, but you're training them of how they're going to respond when they win that point.
Okay.
But again,
Interesting.
we wait until matches. I shouldn't say we often, and I know I've made that mistake in the past. We wait till matches and then want them to change when we're not making them practice the mental skills. We're making them practice their forehand, backhand, serve, everything in practice, but we're not doing the mental skills. So we can't expect them to do it in the match if we haven't planned and prepared that way.
Right.
Doubles. You want your doubles team communicating, touching, connecting every point, but we go send them off to a court to go play and we might stress it, but we're not there to make sure they're doing it or put a consequence on if they're not.
Right.
Now, I
Well,
was old school and we did a lot of physical conditioning if you threw your racket or had an outburst or didn't touch your partner in doubles. A lot of push-ups and kangaroo jumps, but I know that that's not always yeah, looked at highly now.
right.
We
Well,
were in great mental and physical shape, Bill.
actually, we wouldn't get water. We were, you had to run. I mean, it was back in the Stone Ages. Yeah, I relate to that. So I've got one more question. Look, for those of you listening along with us, if you have a question for Tami, now's the time to put it in the chat box. We will answer your questions. But we're kind of getting towards the end here. But so I've got 10 courts going on, right? I got my
Mhm.
guys and girls playing at the same time. We're spread out. I'm trying to get around to see everybody, and I might have 3 to 5 minutes on every court before I got to move on. As a coach, how do I manage that? What do I say? Do I say anything? Because remember, I haven't seen what's been going on. I walk upon this crime scene basically, right? And I've got to help you either maintain or regain, right? So, what do I do when I have that small window of time?
Again, I think that's where the preparation as a coach comes in. And you're not always going to be prepared, but knowing what the athlete needs in different situations, preparing them ahead of time of, hey, if I'm not available, here are some things I want you to go to mentally. Like go to your song in your head or go to your happy place and think about anything else. Give them two or three things that if you're not there, they can do. And they've got to take responsibility. Otherwise, it doesn't matter, Bill. It's like,
Right,
well, coach wasn't there to remind me or do. No, if you really want to be the best tennis player, and I think that's communicating that, hey, this is the way you can up your game. Take charge of your mental game. I'm going to be there to help when I can. I think number two, you know, some athletes didn't like this, but I strategized of these are the courts we have to win. I mean, every coach I think does that. I
Yep.
mean, that doesn't mean I don't believe in you, but just based on past performance, this is where my attention has to go.
Right.
You can look at it as a negative, or you can prove me wrong. That's up to you. I think another way is getting other teammates involved. Usually you have a couple players not playing, make them feel a part of it. Hey, you're on Susie's court, you're on, and having them have the conversation of what that player may need when they start to redline, when they start to struggle, or giving them a couple of pointers ahead of time. Hey, if she starts to do this, suggest this, or make her laugh.
Right.
So I think utilizing your entire team, if there's other staff members, to just have those conversations. And I know, different levels are limited, who can talk, when and what, but you can always say, hey, start singing, even, if you're not an official coach on the court.
Well, I mean, I love that. And I like hearing you say use the other parts of the team and other players and whatnot, because we have done that for a long time now, and I feel like it really really helps us, because there are things that some of our players will say to another player that they won't say to me or the assistant coach, or they'll say it in Spanish where I'm not going to get it, and it just translates better. But I think for me, that's been one of the biggest things that's helped our team, especially our guys' team, because they have now really bought into each other. And I mean, honestly, that's probably why we're doing well, because they are literally an extension of each other and the coaching, and it's 14 people helping versus just me and an assistant.
Yeah. And think about it. If I'm in college or high school and I've got a teammate like back there supporting me every point, I'm going to find a way, a little bit extra to give to win that point. Or because it's not just me. Oh, who cares if I lose? I'm going, lost that first set. I check out mentally. It's harder to check out when someone's back there supporting you and trying to help you, because now you're in it together.
Right. I know I said I only had one more question, but this is one that
Okay.
just kind of came to my mind. One of our players last year, we were in Mobile playing, and on the changeover, he said, "Coach, tell me this is a practice match." And I literally thought he was starting to lose his mind because of the heat. But he said, "I need you to tell me this is a practice match." And so I said, "Yeah, it's the biggest practice match you've ever played, right? Right here." And he goes, "Okay, that's what I needed." And he comes back and he wins in 3 sets, right?
Uh-huh.
And I never thought about it until much, much later. We were driving back home, that he needed me to be on the same page with him mentally to be able to get through it, because he just kind of went through the motions differently. Have you seen something like that before? Or, I mean, did I do the right thing by just, was I enabling
Hey,
him, or?
I think the results speak for themselves. You
Yeah,
might and that's the beauty of coaching. What button can you push to get them to do what you want? And we're not always successful. But you would obviously, for him to feel comfortable in asking that, you would have the line of communication open so he could tell you what he needed. And so that helps your chances of pushing the right button be even more successful. So,
well, luckily I pushed the right button that day. So to kind of summarize, this has been amazing. I could stay on here with you for like 5 hours, because I'm making these notes not only for everybody who's watching, but also for myself too. This has been amazing. But what would you give these coaches as kind of a summary of how they can help their athletes, help their tennis players be better, even when I'm not a mental coach? I'm just some dude. How can I do a better job?
it's modeling. You know, obviously I've given a couple of tools that you can use. The 5 1s or the 5 minute writing exercise. But how are you showing up every day? Are you showing up consistent, or is it how the rest of your day has gone? Are you showing up? You're giving them the model. How are you talking about your boss? How are you responding when they lose a game or a point? What's your body language like? Being a model really can set the tone. And I think maybe even in tennis more than any other sport.
Right.
because just the dynamics of a tennis coach and a tennis team. So model what you want and make sure it's not just words, that you're living it as well. I don't know if we have enough time, Bill, but probably you know, I'd be in trouble with myself if I didn't mention this. But one of the best tools that we need to make sure as coaches, but that will help athletes, is making sure they live their why. Why
Okay.
do they play tennis? What's the bigger reason? We put so much on winning and losing. And while I hate to lose more than anyone, if I have a bigger picture, not based on wins and losses, because I love the game, I love putting myself on the line, I love that field of competition, or I love being a part of a team, whatever it may be, there's no right or wrong except winning and losing. That's got to be the goal, but not why we do it, or we're always going to be let down.
Right.
But if, and as a coach, why do you coach? Yeah, you hope to win a championship, but that can't be why you
Yeah.
coach. And so if we keep that at the forefront of our brain before we go on the court, it helps put things in perspective. And when we do fall short, it really helps us bounce back easier, sooner, quicker. If I lose, okay, that stunk. I'm going to be mad at myself probably for a little bit, but hey, that was I true to myself? Did I live my why? Well, if not, that's what I need to change first and foremost. If I did, okay, I did what I could do. I can look myself in the mirror, even though I didn't get the result we wanted. But
Right.
I could talk about this all day, but I'll just finish that with saying that too often, young athletes, particularly high school, even college level, we sacrifice our why for short term results. We give our confidence because we had a bad service game or we lost a game instead of, okay, I didn't get that short term, but what did I learn from it? So maybe it helps me get that longer term that I want. So be true to your why.
There you go. I love it. Well, for those of you watching, TamiMatheny.com, go to the website. You can buy her book there. You can connect with Tami. She is an absolute rock star for joining us today. Can't thank you enough. I know David appreciates it. I'm hoping I'm going to run into you sometime soon.
We'll have to make sure that.
Our paths are going to cross, but thanks everybody for watching, and this has been recorded, so you'll be able to go back and watch it again, pull some more nuggets. I've got 2 pages of notes here that I've been taking. So Tami, thank you so much for doing this, and hopefully we'll see you somewhere soon.
Always good to see you. And again, I said this before we got on. Anything Dave or you ask me to do, I'm all in. I appreciate all that you guys do.
All righty, talk to you soon.
All
Tami
right.
Matheny,
Bye.
everybody.